You know that moment when someone assumes they know your entire life story based on your appearance? Well, let me tell you about the day Karen Whitmore decided I was homeless, while I was sitting on my own front porch, overlooking my own lake, on land that's been in my family for 3 generations. I'm Marcus Chun, and I suppose I should start by explaining how a tech millionaire ends up looking like what Karen would call undesirable. See, I just finished a 72-hour coding marathon for a government contract, the kind where you can't shower, shave, or change clothes because every minute counts when national security is involved. My flannel shirt had coffee stains, my jeans had holes from crawling under server racks, and my beard looked like I'd been living in the woods. Which, technically, I had been. My cabin sits on 847 acres of pristine wilderness in northern Montana, complete with a private lake that's been my family's sanctuary since my great-grandfather bought this land for practically nothing back in 1952. The property is so remote that most people don't even know it exists, except for the fancy HOA development that was built on what used to be the old access road about 5 years ago. I was enjoying my first cup of real coffee in 3 days, watching the sunrise paint the lake gold, when I heard the unmistakable sound of designer heels clicking on gravel. Now, the only way to reach my cabin is through a private road that clearly states, private property, and no trespassing every 50 feet. So whoever was coming had already broken at least one law. Karen Whitmore appeared around the bend like a vision from a suburban nightmare. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a pink tracksuit that probably cost more than most people's rent, and the kind of self-righteous expression that screams, "I'd like to speak to your manager," from a mile away. She was flanked by 2 other women who looked like they'd been copy-pasted from the same entitled soccer mom template. "Excuse me." Karen's voice could have shattered glass. "You cannot be here." I took another sip of coffee and looked around at my property, my dock, my lake, my mountains. "Can't I? This is a private community." She waved a manicured hand toward the HOA development visible through the trees. "Homeless individuals are not permitted to camp on our property." Here's where it gets interesting. The HOA development, Lakeside Luxury Estates, was built on land that the previous owner sold without realizing he didn't actually own the mineral rights, water rights, or access easements. See, when you're dealing with century-old property laws in Montana, things get complicated fast. The original deed, the one my great-grandfather signed, included subsurface rights, water rights, and something called a perpetual access covenant that essentially made the old logging road a permanent right-of-way. But Karen didn't know that. All she knew was that there was a scruffy-looking man sitting on what she assumed was her community's property. "Tell me where you're watching from, and has anything like this happened in your city or state?" "Ma'am," I said, setting down my coffee cup with deliberate calm, "I think there might be some confusion about who owns what around here." "There's no confusion." Karen's voice went up an octave. "I'm the president of the Lakeside Luxury Estates HOA, and I'm ordering you to leave immediately." One of her companions, a brunette with the same entitled energy, pulled out her phone. "Should I call the police, Karen?" "Absolutely. And animal control. Look at that creature." She pointed at my dog, Ranger, a beautiful German shepherd who was lounging in the morning sun. "It's probably rabid." Now, insulting me is one thing. Insulting my dog crosses a line that shouldn't be crossed. "That creature," I said, standing up slowly, "is a trained protection dog worth more than your car. And before you call anyone, you might want to check whose property you're actually standing on." Karen laughed, one of those shrill, condescending sounds that makes your teeth ache. "Property? This entire area belongs to our development. We have the deed. Do you now?" I pulled out my phone and opened the county assessor's app. Because according to the official records, this parcel, all 847 acres of it, belongs to Marcus Chun. That would be me. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across Karen's face. Then her expression hardened into pure indignation. "I don't care what your fake app says," she snapped. "You're trespassing, and you're going to jail." She turned to brunette soccer mom. "Call 911. Tell them we have a vagrant who's threatening homeowners and harboring a dangerous animal." As her friend dialed, Karen stepped closer to me, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a menacing whisper. "You have no idea who you're messing with. My husband is a lawyer. My brother-in-law is a county commissioner. And I personally know the sheriff." I smiled. "That's nice. My lawyer is the Attorney General's office. My accountant is the IRS. And I personally own the land your entire development sits on." The color drained from Karen's face, but she recovered quickly. "We'll see about that," she hissed. 20 minutes later, Deputy Rodriguez pulled up in his patrol car. I knew Rodriguez. He'd been out here before when hikers got lost and needed rescue. Good man, fair cop, someone who actually read reports before making arrests. "Morning, Mr. Chun," Rodriguez said, tipping his hat. "Got a call about a disturbance?" Karen immediately launched into her performance. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This vagrant has been threatening us and refuses to leave our community property." Rodriguez looked at me, looked at my cabin, looked at the private property signs, and sighed. "Mrs. Whitmore." Karen Whitmore, president of the Lakeside Luxury Estates, HOA. "Mrs. Whitmore, you do realize you're standing on Mr. Chin's private property right now? That's impossible. Our development owns everything from the main road to the lake." Rodriguez pulled out his own phone and showed her the county map. "Ma'am, your development sits on a 12-acre parcel that was subdivided from the original Chin family property. Mr. Chin still owns everything else, including the lake, the surrounding forest, and the access road you drove in on." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Now," Rodriguez continued, "I'm going to need you and your friends to return to your vehicles and leave Mr. Chin's property. This is your only warning." But Karen wasn't done. Oh no, she was just getting started. "This isn't over," she said, backing toward the tree line. "I don't care what your little maps say. We'll see what a real investigation turns up." As she and her minions retreated, I heard her talking rapidly on her phone. "Need you to run a full background check. Property records going back 50 years. I don't care what it costs." Rodriguez shook his head as we watched them go. "You want some advice, Marcus? Document everything. People like that don't give up easy." He was right. What I didn't realize was that Karen Whitmore was about to turn my quiet mountain retreat into a war zone. And she had no idea that she was picking a fight with someone who had the resources, the connections, and the legal firepower to end her little reign of terror once and for all. But first, she was going to make my life very, very interesting. 3 days after Karen's dramatic exit, I thought maybe she'd realized her mistake and moved on. I should have known better. People like Karen don't admit they're wrong. They double down until reality itself bends to their will, or they destroy themselves trying. I was in my home office, working on a cybersecurity protocol for the Department of Defense, when Ranger started growling. He's got different growls for different situations: playful, warning, serious threat. This was his strangers with bad intentions growl. Through my window, I could see a white sedan parked at the edge of my property line. 2 people in cheap suits were walking around with clipboards, taking photos, and pointing at various structures. They looked official enough to fool most people, but I've dealt with enough actual federal agents to know the difference. Real feds drive government fleet vehicles with specific license plate patterns. Real feds coordinate with local law enforcement before conducting investigations. And real feds don't wear suits from Men's Warehouse while investigating property disputes in rural Montana. I grabbed my camera and started documenting their little performance. Through my telephoto lens, I could see their clipboards were filled with what looked like official forms, but the letterhead was wrong. The seal was close to the real Montana state seal, but the proportions were off. And the woman kept checking her phone like she was reading instructions. After about an hour, they packed up and left. That's when I called my attorney. "Marcus," said Jennifer Walsh, my lawyer, and one of the few people who knew exactly how much money I had. "What kind of trouble are you in now?" "The HOA kind. Got a minute to hear about Karen Whitmore?" 20 minutes later, Jennifer was laughing so hard she had to put me on hold. When she came back, she was all business. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm filing for a restraining order against Mrs. Whitmore and her associates. Second, I'm requesting a full title search to document your ownership beyond any possible doubt. Third, I'm having my investigator run background checks on everyone involved. How long will that take? The restraining order? I can have that filed today. The title search? Maybe a week. The background checks? Depends on how deep we need to dig. Dig deep, Jen. Something tells me Karen's got more secrets than just being a pain in the ass. I was right. But while Jennifer was doing her legal thing, Karen was escalating in ways I hadn't anticipated. The next morning, I woke up to find my mailbox had been replaced with a bright orange sign reading "Condemned Structure, Unsafe for Habitation." It looked official enough to fool a casual observer, complete with county seals and reference numbers. The problem was, I knew the actual county building inspector. Tom Brennan had been out here 6 months ago to sign off on my solar panel installation. My cabin wasn't just up to code. It exceeded current standards by a significant margin. I called Tom directly. Marcus? Yeah, I saw that sign when I drove past yesterday. Weird thing is, nobody in my office issued that notice. And the reference number? That's from a condemned trailer home we dealt with 3 years ago. So it's fake. Completely. You want me to file a report? Absolutely. And Tom, can you do me a favor and document the actual condition of my property? I have a feeling I'm going to need official proof that my home is perfectly safe. Tom came out that afternoon with his full inspection kit. Not only did he confirm that my cabin exceeded all safety standards, but he also discovered something interesting about the fake condemnation notice. This paper, he said, holding it up to the light, it's got a watermark. Expensive stuff. And look at this printing quality. This came from a professional print shop, not someone's home computer. Any way to trace it? Maybe. The watermark is from a specialty paper company in Billings. They keep records of large orders. While Tom was doing his investigation, I decided to take a closer look at the Lakeside Luxury Estates development itself. Public records are wonderful things when you know how to read them. The development was owned by Whitmore Holdings LLC, which was owned by another LLC, which was owned by a trust, which eventually traced back to Karen and her husband, Richard Whitmore. But here's where it got interesting. The original land purchase had been financed through a series of loans that used the entire lake property as collateral. Problem was, they didn't own the entire lake property. They'd borrowed millions of dollars using my land as security for their loans. That's fraud. Federal fraud. Comment below. Would you fight back legally or strike harder? I was still processing this information when my security cameras picked up movement. Karen was back, but this time she wasn't alone. She had 3 men with her, big guys in security uniforms with Whitmore Security Services patches on their shoulders. They weren't cops. They weren't even licensed security guards, as far as I could tell. But they were walking onto my property like they owned the place, and one of them had bolt cutters. I watched through my cameras as they cut the chain on my gate and drove right up to my cabin. Karen stepped out of the lead vehicle like she was arriving at a royal reception. "Mr. Chun," she called out. "By order of the Montana State Building Authority, you are required to evacuate this condemned structure immediately." I opened my front door and stepped onto my porch, making sure my body camera was recording. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're trespassing on private property. Again. This property has been condemned as unsafe for human habitation," she announced, waving what looked like an official document. "You have 30 minutes to gather your personal belongings before we secure the structure." One of her fake security guards started toward my cabin with what looked like a drill and some plywood. That's when Ranger decided he'd heard enough. A 100-pound German Shepherd moving at full speed is an impressive sight. The fake security guard took one look at Ranger's approach and decided that maybe securing condemned buildings wasn't worth his hourly wage. "Call off your dog," Karen screamed. "Ranger, stay," I commanded. He stopped immediately, but remained in position between the intruders and my cabin. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to give you one chance to leave my property voluntarily before I call the real police." "We are the police," she shouted, but her voice cracked slightly. "No, you're not. You're trespassers with fake documents, and you're about to be arrested." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, making sure to speak loudly enough for everyone to hear. 911. This is Marcus Chun at 1847 Lakeside Road. I have 4 individuals trespassing on my property with fake government documents, attempting to illegally evict me from my home. I need deputies out here immediately. Karen's face went pale, but she held her ground. You can't prove those documents are fake. Actually, I can. I held up my phone. I just got off the phone with Tom Brennan, the actual county building inspector. He's never heard of the Montana State Building Authority because it doesn't exist. And that reference number on your fake condemnation notice? It belongs to a trailer that was demolished 3 years ago. The fake security guards were already backing toward their vehicles, but Karen wasn't done yet. Fine, she spat. You want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. You have no idea what kind of connections I have in this state. Neither do you, I replied calmly. As sirens approached in the distance, Karen and her hired muscle scrambled into their vehicles and sped away, leaving deep tire ruts in my gravel driveway and a fake condemnation notice fluttering in the wind. Deputy Rodriguez arrived 15 minutes later, along with 2 other patrol cars and a detective I didn't recognize. Mr. Chun, Rodriguez said, shaking his head, this is getting out of hand. It's about to get worse, I told him, handing over the fake documents and my camera footage. Karen Whitmore just committed criminal trespass, attempted fraud, and conspiracy. And I think I know why she's so desperate to get me off my property. The detective, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Martinez, looked up from the fake condemnation notice. What do you mean? She's been using my land as collateral for loans she had no right to make. If anyone actually surveys the property boundaries, her entire financial house of cards comes tumbling down. Detective Martinez and I exchanged looks. She was thinking the same thing I was. Mr. Chun, she said slowly, how would you feel about helping us set a trap? Detective Martinez's plan was elegant in its simplicity. We were going to give Karen exactly what she wanted, a public confrontation with official witnesses present. But instead of the easy victory she expected, she was going to walk straight into a carefully documented case of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. The key, Martinez explained as we sat in my kitchen planning the operation, is letting her dig her own grave. People like Mrs. Whitmore can't resist showing off when they think they're winning. The trap was set for the following Thursday. Martinez arranged for a routine property survey to be conducted by the county, ostensibly to resolve the boundary dispute once and for all. The surveyor would be real, the equipment would be real, but the timing was carefully chosen to coincide with Karen's weekly HOA board meeting. She won't be able to resist, Martinez predicted. She'll see the survey crew and assume it's her chance to prove she's right in front of witnesses. While we waited for Thursday, Jennifer's investigation into Karen's finances was revealing some fascinating details. Whitmore Holdings LLC had borrowed $3.2 million from 3 different banks, using the entire lakeside property, including mineral and water rights, as collateral for each loan. The problem? They only owned 12 acres out of the 847-acre property they'd pledged as security. This is textbook mortgage fraud, Jennifer explained over the phone. She's essentially sold the same property 3 times over to different lenders. When this comes out, she's looking at federal charges. But Karen wasn't waiting around for our carefully planned trap. Tuesday morning, I woke up to find my driveway blocked by a massive RV with Whitmore Family Vacation painted on the side in cheerful letters. It was parked directly across my private road, making it impossible for me to leave my property. The RV's occupants were a family I'd never seen before, a middle-aged couple with 2 teenagers who seemed genuinely confused about why they were there. I walked over and knocked on their door. The man who answered looked embarrassed. You must be the property owner, he said. I'm sorry about this. Mrs. Whitmore from the HOA said we could park here for free while we visited the area. She said it was community property. I'm afraid Mrs. Whitmore misinformed you, I replied gently. This is my private driveway, and you're blocking my only access road. The man's wife appeared behind him, looking mortified. Oh God, we're so sorry. Karen told us this was a public camping area. She even gave us this official-looking permit. She handed me a document that was obviously fake, wrong fonts, incorrect seals, and a signature from someone claiming to be the Montana State Parks Director, a position that doesn't exist. Don't worry about it, I told them. You're not in trouble. But I do need you to move your RV so I can get to work. As they were packing up, the wife pulled me aside. That woman, Karen? She's been asking a lot of strange questions about you. Wanted to know if we'd seen any drugs, weapons, or suspicious activity around your cabin. We told her you seemed like a perfectly normal guy, but she kept pushing. After the RV family left, I called Detective Martinez. She's trying to build a case, Martinez said grimly. Getting witnesses to report suspicious behavior, creating a paper trail of complaints. Classic harassment campaign. What's the end game? Probably trying to get you arrested on some trumped-up charge. Once you're in jail, even temporarily, she can claim the property is abandoned and try to seize it through some legal loophole. That afternoon, Karen escalated again. This time, she brought what appeared to be a full film crew, professional cameras, boom mics, and a woman in a business suit who was clearly meant to be a reporter. They set up on the public road just outside my property line and started filming what looked like a news report. This is Channel 7 News, the fake reporter announced to the camera, reporting live from lakeside luxury estates, where residents are living in fear due to a dangerous squatter who has taken over community property. I grabbed my own camera and started recording their performance. The news crew was actually pretty convincing. They had all the right equipment and professional demeanor. But there were tells if you knew what to look for. The camera had no network logos. The reporter's microphone was generic, not branded with a specific station. And most tellingly, there was no news van, just regular civilian vehicles. Karen appeared on camera, playing the role of concerned citizen to perfection. We've tried reasoning with this individual, she said, gesturing toward my cabin. But he's become increasingly hostile and threatening. Just yesterday, he sicked his attack dog on innocent families trying to enjoy our community amenities. How would you expose Karen in public? The fake reporter nodded sympathetically. What kind of threats has he made? He claims to own property that clearly belongs to our homeowners association. He's forged documents, made false claims to law enforcement, and created a dangerous situation for our children and elderly residents. I'd heard enough. I walked down to the property line, making sure to stay on my side of the boundary. Excuse me, I called out. Are you folks with an actual news station? The fake reporter looked flustered. We're conducting an investigation. Which station? What's your FCC license number? Who's your news director? The camera operator started lowering his equipment. The fake reporter looked to Karen for guidance. You don't have to answer his questions. Karen snapped. He's trying to intimidate you. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm calling Channel 7 to verify that they have a crew out here. Because if you're impersonating journalists, that's a federal crime. The fake news crew packed up faster than a traveling circus caught in a thunderstorm. Within 5 minutes, they were gone, leaving Karen standing alone on the roadside looking like she'd been abandoned by her own army. But she wasn't done. As her fake news crew drove away, Karen pulled out her phone and made a call. It's me, she said, not realizing I could hear every word. The media thing didn't work. Time for Plan C. Yes, I know it's risky. Just do it. Plan C, as it turned out, involved animal control. The next morning, Officer Janet Mills from the County Animal Control Division showed up at my door with what appeared to be a valid warrant to seize Ranger for aggressive behavior toward community members. I'm sorry, Mr. Chan, Officer Mills said, genuinely apologetic. I have 3 separate complaints filed against your dog, all claiming he attacked or threatened residents of the lakeside development. I looked at the warrant. It was real, signed by Judge Patricia Hendricks, whom I'd never heard of, and referencing specific incident numbers and dates. Officer Mills, can I see the original complaints? She handed me the paperwork. All 3 complaints were filed by different people, but they all had the same writing style, the same specific details, and the same unusual misspelling of aggressive as aggressive. These are all written by the same person, I pointed out. Officer Mills frowned and looked at the documents more carefully. You know what? You're right. Same handwriting, same pen ink, even the same paper type. And look at the dates, I continued. This complaint says my dog attacked someone on Monday at 3 p.m. But I was in a video conference with the Pentagon at that time, and Ranger was sleeping right next to my desk. I have the meeting recording. Officer Mills was starting to look very uncomfortable. Mr. Chun, I think I need to make some phone calls before we proceed. While she was calling her supervisor, I was doing some quick research on Judge Patricia Hendricks. According to the Montana State Bar Association, there was no active judge by that name in the state. The signature on the warrant belonged to a judge who had retired 5 years ago. Officer Mills, I said when she finished her call, I think you're going to want to see this. 20 minutes later, Detective Martinez arrived with a very angry look on her face. Mr. Chun, she said, we just arrested Karen Whitmore for filing false police reports, forging legal documents, and conspiracy to commit fraud. But she's already posted bail, and her lawyer is claiming this is all a misunderstanding. What about the fake judge signature? That's the federal crime that's going to put her away. You can't forge a judge's signature on official documents and claim it was an accident. But even as we were talking, I could see Karen's white Mercedes pulling up to the HOA development. She was back, and judging by the number of cars following her, she'd brought reinforcements. Detective, I said, watching the convoy through my binoculars, I think Karen's about to make her final move. What do you mean? She's got at least 20 people over there, and they're all heading this way. Martinez grabbed her radio. This is Detective Martinez. I need all available units to respond to 1847 Lakeside Road. We may have a situation developing. As we watched, Karen's mob started walking across the property line onto my land. They were carrying signs, cameras, and what looked like surveying equipment. But most concerning were the 3 men in the back who appeared to be carrying something that looked suspiciously like restraints. They're not just here to protest, I realized. They're here to make a citizen's arrest. Martinez was already on her radio calling for backup, but the nearest patrol units were at least 15 minutes away. Karen's voice carried across the distance as her group approached my cabin. Citizens of Lakeside, today we take back our community from this dangerous criminal. I looked at Detective Martinez. How do you feel about a little street theater? What do you have in mind? Karen wants a show? Let's give her one she'll never forget. Karen's mob was about 50 yards from my cabin when I stepped onto my front porch, hands raised in apparent surrender. Okay, Karen, I called out, making sure my voice carried to her entire audience. You got me. I give up. Karen stopped mid-stride, clearly not expecting capitulation. Behind her, 23 residents of Lakeside Luxury Estates stood with their phones out, recording what they thought was going to be the triumphant moment when their HOA president finally dealt with the troublesome squatter. That's right, Karen shouted back, her confidence returning. You're trespassing on private property, and we're making a citizen's arrest. Before you do that, I said, pulling out a thick manila folder. Maybe you'd like to see some paperwork. Detective Martinez, positioned behind my cabin where Karen's group couldn't see her, was coordinating with the backup units that were now less than 10 minutes away. The plan was to let Karen incriminate herself as thoroughly as possible before revealing the trap. I don't care about your fake documents, Karen declared, but I could see uncertainty creeping into her expression. Oh, these aren't fake, I replied, holding up the first document. This is the original land deed from 1952, showing that my great-grandfather purchased 847 acres, including all water and mineral rights. I held up the second document. This is the current county assessment, confirming that I still own all 847 acres. Third document. This is the survey you requested, Karen. Turns out your development is actually built on my land. You've been trespassing for 5 years. Karen's face was turning an interesting shade of purple, but she pressed on. Those are forgeries. Everyone knows you're just a homeless drifter. Homeless? I laughed. Karen, do you know what I do for a living? You're unemployed. I held up my phone, making sure everyone could hear. Jennifer? Yeah, it's Marcus. Can you conference in Director Williams from the Pentagon? Karen would like to know about my employment status. The phone speaker crackled to life. Mr. Chun, this is Director Williams, Defense Cybersecurity Division. Is there some question about your security clearance or current contract status? Karen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. No, sir, I replied. Just someone who thinks I'm unemployed. You might want to tell them about the $12 million contract I'm working on. Well, Mr. Chun, without going into classified details, I can confirm that you're currently our primary contractor for the Mountain West Cybersecurity Initiative, and your work is critical to national defense infrastructure. I hung up and smiled at Karen. Still think I'm homeless? But Karen wasn't done. She'd invested too much in this confrontation to back down now. I don't care who you claim to work for, she screamed. You're still trespassing on HOA property. Actually, said a new voice, he's not. Everyone turned to see a man in an expensive suit walking up the driveway. Behind him were two more men in suits, and behind them were 3 patrol cars with their lights flashing. Who are you? Karen demanded. Special Agent Robert Hayes, FBI Financial Crimes Division. He held up his badge. Mrs. Whitmore, you're under arrest for bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and filing false documents with federal agencies. The color drained completely from Karen's face. That's impossible. I haven't done anything wrong. Agent Hayes nodded to his colleagues, who began moving toward Karen. Ma'am, you used Mr. Chin's property as collateral for $3.2 million in loans from 3 different banks. That's federal fraud. But I own this property. The HOA owns this property. No, ma'am, you don't. Your development sits on a 12-acre parcel that was legally subdivided from Mr. Chin's property in 2018. You never owned the lake, the surrounding forest, or the mineral rights you pledged as loan collateral. As the FBI agents began reading Karen her rights, the crowd of HOA residents started to realize they'd been played. Phones came out again, but this time they were recording Karen's arrest, not my supposed eviction. Wait! Karen shouted as the handcuffs clicked into place. This is all his fault. He's the one who's been harassing us. He threatened us. He sicked his dog on innocent families. Agent Hayes looked at me with mild amusement. Mr. Chun, have you been harassing anyone? Well, I said thoughtfully, I did refuse to let them trespass on my property. And I did call the police when they tried to evict me from my own home with fake documents. Oh, and I wouldn't let them use my land as collateral for their fraudulent loans. Sounds reasonable to me. As Karen was loaded into the FBI vehicle, still protesting her innocence, Detective Martinez addressed the crowd of HOA residents. Ladies and gentlemen, you're not in any trouble, but I need you to understand what's been happening here. Your HOA president has been lying to you about property ownership, filing false police reports, and committing federal fraud. Mr. Chun is the legitimate owner of this land, and he has been since long before your development was built. One of the residents, an elderly man with a confused expression, raised his hand. Does this mean we don't actually own our homes? Your homes are fine, Martinez assured him. You own your individual lots legally. The problem is that Mrs. Whitmore claimed to own property that belonged to Mr. Chun, and she used that false claim to borrow money fraudulently. A woman in the crowd called out, "What about our HOA fees? We've been paying Karen thousands of dollars." That was a good question. I stepped forward. I'll be working with the FBI and the county attorney's office to make sure everyone gets their money back, I announced. Karen's been stealing from you just as much as she's been lying about me. As the crowd began to disperse, many of the residents approached me to apologize. They'd been told I was a dangerous squatter, and they believed their HOA president without question. Now they were realizing they'd been part of an elaborate fraud scheme. But the story wasn't over yet. As Agent Hayes was preparing to leave, he pulled me aside. Mr. Chun, there's something else you should know. Mrs. Whitmore's fraud scheme goes deeper than just your property. We've been investigating a network of HOA-related financial crimes across 3 states. Your case might be the key to breaking the whole thing open. What do you mean? Karen Whitmore isn't just a local HOA president gone rogue. She's part of a larger organization that's been running similar scams in rural communities throughout the Mountain West. They target properties with complicated ownership histories, create fake HOAs, and use the confusion to commit fraud. I felt a chill run down my spine. How many other people are they doing this to? We think at least a dozen, maybe more. But here's the thing. You're the first victim who had the resources and knowledge to fight back effectively. Most of their targets are elderly property owners or people without the means to hire good lawyers. What do you need from me? Agent Hayes smiled grimly. How would you feel about going undercover? 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a nondescript office building in Denver, wearing a wire and pretending to be a potential investor in something called Mountain Communities Development Group. Agent Hayes hadn't been kidding when he said Karen's fraud scheme was bigger than just my property. The woman across from me, Rebecca Sterling, looked like Karen's more sophisticated sister, perfectly styled, expensively dressed, and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from successfully scamming people for years. Mr. Chun, she was saying, your background in cybersecurity makes you exactly the kind of investor we're looking for. Someone who understands the value of discretion. I'm intrigued, I replied, playing the role of a corrupt tech executive looking to launder money through real estate schemes. Tell me more about how this works. Rebecca leaned forward conspiratorially. We identify rural properties with complicated ownership histories, old mining claims, family lands with unclear boundaries, that sort of thing. Then we create homeowners associations that claim jurisdiction over those properties. Even if you don't actually own the land, ownership is a matter of perception, Mr. Chun. If we can convince the local authorities, the banks, and the community that we have legitimate authority over a property, then for all practical purposes, we do own it. Rebecca pulled out a tablet and showed me a map dotted with red pins across Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. Each of these represents a successful acquisition through our HOA integration model. Acquisition? Well, we don't technically acquire the properties initially. We establish HOAs that claim management authority, then leverage that authority to secure loans using the properties as collateral. Once we have the financing in place, we can either force the original owners to sell through legal pressure or simply wait for them to default on the liens we place against their property. I kept my expression neutral while my hidden recorder captured every word. That's creative. What's the success rate? 93%, Rebecca said proudly. Most property owners don't have the resources to fight a sustained legal campaign. They eventually give up and sell to us for pennies on the dollar. What about the 7% who don't give up? Rebecca's smile turned cold. There are ways to handle difficult property owners. Sometimes people have accidents. Sometimes they face criminal charges based on anonymous tips. Sometimes their pets go missing or their elderly relatives have problems with social services. The wire I was wearing suddenly felt very heavy. Agent Hayes had warned me that this organization was ruthless, but hearing Rebecca casually discuss threatening innocent people was chilling. Interesting approach, I managed. How do you handle the legal complications when the real property owners fight back? We have judges on payroll in 12 counties across 3 states. We also maintain relationships with certain law enforcement officials who understand the value of cooperation. Rebecca showed me another screen on her tablet, a list of names with dollar amounts next to them. I recognized several county commissioners, 2 sheriffs, and at least 3 judges. Karen Whitmore was one of our most effective field operators, Rebecca continued. Unfortunately, she got careless and attracted federal attention. But her work in Montana generated over $2.8 million in loan proceeds before the operation was compromised. What happened to her? She's currently in federal custody, but she won't be a problem. Karen understands the importance of loyalty to the organization. My phone buzzed with a text message, the signal from Agent Hayes that they had enough evidence to move. But Rebecca was still talking, and I needed to keep her focused on the details. This sounds like exactly the kind of investment opportunity I've been looking for, I said. When can we get started? Actually, we have a perfect target property lined up. An elderly veteran in Wyoming who owns 1,200 acres of prime mountain land. He's isolated, no family nearby, and he's been having some health problems that could be exacerbated if necessary. You're talking about killing him? Rebecca shrugged. We're talking about removing obstacles to legitimate business development. Sometimes obstacles remove themselves through natural causes. Sometimes they require more direct intervention. That was enough. I stood up and walked toward the door, but Rebecca's voice stopped me. Mr. Chun, I should mention that we've done extensive background research on all our potential investors. We know about your property in Montana, your work with the Defense Department, and your recent interactions with federal law enforcement. I turned back slowly. What are you saying? I'm saying that you have two choices. You can become a very wealthy partner in our organization, or you can become another obstacle that needs to be removed. The office door opened behind me, and two large men in suits entered. They weren't FBI agents. Rebecca, I said calmly, I think you should know something about me. What's that? I'm very good at removing obstacles myself. I pressed the emergency beacon in my pocket, then smiled at Rebecca. Also, everything you just said was recorded and transmitted to the FBI field office downstairs. Rebecca's face went white. That's impossible. We swept this building for electronic surveillance. You swept for FBI surveillance. You didn't sweep for Defense Department quantum encryption technology. The sound of boots in the hallway was getting louder. Rebecca lunged for her tablet, probably trying to destroy evidence, but I was faster. 20 years of training and regular mountain hiking had kept me in better shape than I looked. I had the tablet in my hands when Agent Hayes and 6 other federal agents burst through the door. Rebecca Sterling, Hayes announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. As they cuffed Rebecca and her 2 enforcers, Hayes looked at me with concern. You okay, Marcus? We heard the conversation take a dark turn. I'm fine, but we need to get to Wyoming immediately. She was planning to kill an elderly veteran for his land. Already on it. We have agents en route to protect Mr. Peterson, and we're coordinating with local law enforcement to round up the rest of the network. As we left the building, Hayes handed me a secure phone. Director Williams wants to speak with you. Mr. Chun, came the familiar voice from the Pentagon. Excellent work. The intelligence you've gathered has broken open a criminal conspiracy that was operating in 12 states. We're talking about over $50 million in fraudulent loans and at least 6 suspicious deaths that we can now investigate properly. What happens now? Now you go home to your cabin and your dog, and you let us handle the cleanup. But Marcus, you should know that your country owes you a significant debt of gratitude. 6 months later, I was back on my porch overlooking the lake, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. Ranger was sprawled in his favorite sunny spot, occasionally opening one eye to check on the world before going back to his nap. The Lakeside Luxury Estates development was still there, but it looked different now. The pretentious gate had been replaced with a simple wooden sign reading Lakeside Community, All Welcome. The residents had voted to dissolve the HOA and establish a simple neighborhood association focused on maintaining the roads and organizing the occasional potluck dinner. My phone rang, interrupting the peaceful morning. Marcus, Jennifer's voice was cheerful. I have some news you're going to like. Good news or great news? Great news. The federal court just approved the final restitution settlement. Every resident of Lakeside is getting a full refund of their HOA fees, plus damages. And you're getting compensated for all the harassment, property damage, and legal costs. How much? $847,000. $1,000 for each acre of your property that Karen tried to steal. I laughed. That's poetic justice. It gets better. Karen Whitmore just pled guilty to 17 federal charges. She's looking at 25 years in federal prison. Rebecca Sterling got life without parole for the murder conspiracy charges. And the entire Mountain Communities Development Group has been dismantled. What about the corrupt officials? 12 county commissioners, 4 sheriffs, and 7 judges have been arrested. The FBI is calling it the largest public corruption case in Mountain West history. After I hung up, I walked down to the lake where a small crowd had gathered. It was the monthly community meeting, not an HOA meeting, just neighbors getting together to discuss shared concerns and plan social events. Tom Brennan, the building inspector, waved me over. Marcus, we were just talking about the community center proposal. The residents want to build a small meeting hall and maybe a playground for the kids. Sounds great. Where were you thinking of putting it? An elderly woman named Margaret, who'd been one of Karen's most vocal supporters during the confrontation, stepped forward. Well, we were hoping you might consider donating a small piece of your lakefront property. We know we have no right to ask, but it would mean so much to the community. I pretended to think it over. I might be willing to consider it, but I'd have some conditions. Margaret looked nervous. What kind of conditions? First, there has to be a plaque acknowledging that this is a gift from the Chun family to the community. Second, the playground has to be accessible to children with disabilities. And third, there has to be a dog park section where Ranger and his friends can play. Margaret's face broke into a huge smile. Are you serious? Dead serious. But there's one more condition. The crowd waited anxiously. The community center has to have a big sign out front that says Karen Whitmore Memorial Hall. Everyone stared at me in shock. Just kidding, I said, grinning. How about Lakeside Community Center, where neighbors become friends? The laughter and applause carried across the water. Later that evening, as I was grilling dinner on my deck, Deputy Rodriguez stopped by for his monthly check-in. How's retirement treating you, Marcus? Retirement? I looked confused. Who said anything about retirement? Well, after everything that happened with the fraud case, I figured you might want to take it easy. Actually, I've been busier than ever. The Defense Department has me consulting on rural cybersecurity infrastructure. Turns out there are a lot of small communities that are vulnerable to exactly the kind of scams Karen was running. Rodriguez accepted a beer and settled into one of my deck chairs. So you're still fighting the good fight? In my own way. But now I get to do it from my own front porch, with my own dog, on my own land that nobody can ever take away from me. As the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. 6 months ago, I'd been a millionaire tech contractor living quietly in the mountains. Then Karen Whitmore had tried to steal my property, and everything had changed. But maybe that change had been necessary. Maybe I'd been hiding out in my mountain retreat for too long, using my wealth and skills for my own benefit instead of helping others. The fraud investigation had shown me how many people were being victimized by scams like Karen's. Elderly property owners, rural families, people without the resources to fight back. Now I had a new mission, using my technical expertise and financial resources to help communities protect themselves from predators like Karen Whitmore. It wasn't the quiet retirement I'd planned, but it was more meaningful than any government contract I'd ever worked on. My phone buzzed with a text message from Agent Hayes, new case in Oregon. HOA claiming authority over Native American treaty lands. Interested, I looked out at my lake, at the peaceful community that had grown up around its shores, at rangers sleeping contentedly in the evening breeze. Then I picked up my phone and typed back. When do we start? Some fights are worth having. Some battles need to be fought. And sometimes, when entitled people try to steal what isn't theirs, they discover that their victim has more resources, more connections, and more determination than they ever imagined. Karen Whitmore had thought she was targeting a homeless drifter. Instead, she'd picked a fight with someone who had the skills, the money, and the moral conviction to take down her entire criminal organization. And now, whenever someone like Karen tries to victimize innocent people in small communities across the Mountain West, they might just find themselves facing a quiet man with a German shepherd, a secure phone, and a very long memory for injustice. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you've ever dealt with an HOA Karen or know someone who has, share your story in the comments. And remember, sometimes the person you're trying to intimidate owns more than just the house you're complaining about. They might own everything you can see from your front door.